Hey guys, and welcome to Little Blackbird 91. Apologies about the sound. We haven't got my microphone with me, but I want to talk about Never Ever Met. I think obviously this episode was quite an interesting one, and I'm going to focus on Alicia and Ervin because I believe there is a mismatch going on in terms of emotional safety when it comes to this particular couple. I've seen them operate in a particular way where she actually said she was unsafe. She felt, that she was unfortunately. Not feeling comfortable with his level of anger. Now, what we saw in the episode, I didn't think there was actually much of an issue with his anger. I think there was him obviously stating that he felt unheard, but didn't actually say those words. What he actually really kind of said was, there was an issue with yoga. There was an issue with him with her saying that he felt that he was insecure as a regard of talking about the yoga situation. I think there is issues on both sides. I think there's a reality situation where I do feel like she may not necessarily like him the way he's liking her, and I think that's causing her a little bit of anxiety in the way that she's dealing with her safety, and that she's actually trying to create a little bit of emotional distance. For instance, that yoga situation. There's no way she didn't know. If he asked you the day before and asked you to go yoga next morning, you say no, and then go to yoga with another man who's in another relationship, by the way. This is not abnormal. It's not by mistake. She didn't do a mistake, but she was creating emotional distance, right? It was actually kind of manipulative. But I get it. It's not a sense of like condemning her. It's made to more to say she was creating emotional distance between herself and him. And maybe she felt like she hasn't got very good boundaries to say no or to be able to say, look, you're getting too close. Maybe that was her way of being passive aggressive about the closeness they were having. Because remember earlier on the bed, when she spoke about taking things slow and making it organic, and he said he wanted to lay in the bed with her. He didn't say he wanted sex. He said he wanted to lay in the bed with her. And then she was like letting him know that she wants to take it slow. And then we saw the situation with the autoimmune disease situation where they had to paint on each other's backs. And then she felt like, you know what, he didn't want her to, she didn't want him to tell the group about that situation, which is fair because that's her boundary. And there's nothing wrong with that. It was just a way that, again, we heard her say in between that as well, that yes, sometimes it's difficult for her to ask. She just says it. Right. So we know that because it came down to the cooking situation and she didn't just ask. She pretty much tried to dictate to another man and a woman how they should cook the food instead of just really being able to be, appreciative and say, hey, look, guys, I do have some dietary needs. Is there any chance we can fit that in? That would have been a sensible, fair request. But instead, she didn't do that. Instead, she actually decided that she was going to say it the way she wanted to say it. Right. And so in that space, I'm seeing that there's emotional safety on both sides that really needs to be taken into account, that really needs to be dealt with as well. Okay, so let's just say this first and foremost, the body painting task. Let's break that first part down, right? The vulnerability here is that you touch each other's bodies, but you must ask before you do so. And we know that Alicia was self-conscious in that moment because of the autoimmune disease, autoimmune condition. And, Ervin was touching her body at points and she said she's very conscious of her back because she's obviously lost a lot of weight as well in that space. She's been very health conscious in the last few years. And maybe that's playing a role in the way that she feels comfortable with physical touch. Right. And so that's an understandable thing. Right. So she puts boundaries in and lets him know. Right. That's a communicative part to say, hey, maybe I've got some insecurities around this aspect of my body and you touching me. So sometimes when you touch me, I do maybe recoil or I may pull away a little bit. It's just me being able to have control. And sometimes I feel out of control when someone's able to touch me, even when you're asking. That would be her explaining what's actually really happened to her. And again, explaining the emotional safety part of things, which she kind of did, right? And then she obviously gave a look about the when he was explaining about why she's powerful, and he didn't kind of pick up straight away. In fact, it took the other lady to kind of say, well, she might not be comfortable with this. And then he's like, okay, yeah, well, then he kind of caught himself. So it was a little bit late. In that space, that was potentially him kind of flouting the emotional safety, right? Number two, the yoga incident. He let her know about going to yoga and wanting to do that with her because he wanted to create emotional unity here and also, create moments where we are together. Right? This helps to create the oxytocin. This helps create bonds. This helps us grow stronger, closer together. Right? And it's probably something that's very important to him. Okay. And so what he did, he put in a bid to say, I want to spend time with her. And then that bid was then rejected by her. And not only was it rejected by her, he was then replaced by another man. right? Now that sends mixed signals. In fact, that almost says to the other person, I don't really want you. It's a hit to the ego. And when you replay that scene again, I wish I could. Unfortunately, I don't have my usual filming equipment. But when you replay that scene again, you'll find out that in that space, what she actually ended up doing was he ended up saying, this yoga situation, it was, he felt some type of way about it. And when she went to apologize, she actually said, sorry about that, right? Sorry that sorry that you felt that way about it, right? In fact, sorry that you felt that way about it. And then instead of actually just saying, you know what, I actually see your point, like she you know what I mean? So in normal circumstances, when someone feels some type of way, you can say sorry because you're sorry that you feel that way about it because you are understanding that you are trying to validate their feelings. In this instances, you actually were asked, do you want to go yoga? You said no, went with another man. So really the apology should be focused on actually, you know what, I see where you're coming from. You know what I mean? And I apologize for doing that. That was not my intention. That would have been a clear indication that you made a mistake and that you understand it. Saying sorry that you feel that way, in a sense, does not says that it does say some aspect of validation, but it doesn't solve the issue. You know, you actually did what you did, right? You almost made it as if that he made a mistake for even bringing it up. And we know that because then she not even later on, within a second or same conversation, flips it and says about insecurity. Like, are you sure it's not your insecurity? So what you have to understand is that people who do this oftentimes have an avoidant attachment style, and what they're doing is they're creating distance emotionally in the relationship. And what they end up doing is end up gaslighting sometimes and blaming you, even though they know, okay, that they've made a mistake, even though they know that what they did would have been painful for you, but because it's hard for them to say sorry, right? Because that would mean that they're wrong. And that would mean they would have to change some things. That would mean that also they would have to be emotionally closer to you. They don't do that, right? Okay. All right. So then the cooking dispute happened, which I can see both sides here because first and foremost, she actually goes to the kitchen, has a conversation with one of the guys in the kitchen who's cooking, and the lady as well is cooking, Brittany and I think it's Ty, right? And they're cooking up a storm, right? They're just cooking up a storm. She comes in the kitchen and in a sense almost starts demanding that, in a very passive aggressive way, you ain't got no vegan butter, I want it this way, da da da. Da. And he's like, I'm cooking for everybody. What would have been a sensible way of addressing the situation would have been like, hey, look, you know what? I know you guys are cooking up a storm. I really appreciate you guys. Is there any chance you guys can just, cook me up a vegan aspect of what you're doing if it's not too much trouble? If not, I can cook it myself, not a problem at all. Right? That would have been you being able to be accommodating and understanding that these people are working hard, they're cooking for everybody, they're cooking up a storm, you're in their kitchen. And one thing about this is if this is a woman, we don't understand, right? But because of a man, we understand we sometimes can be like, he should have done better. And he should have, because he started getting a bit irate, right? Rather than explaining his actual point. But she then went and took that information back to back to Ervin and said obviously he was shouting at me and da 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 da. Meanwhile, she hadn't fully explained the fact that she was actually part of the issue, reason why he was, and took accountability, right? The fact that she went in there trying to request and demand. And so what that shows is that you're going to now put this person in harm's way, because now if he takes what you said, he has to get his gospel. He now has to go and approach that man. It can become an issue. Right. So but the bigger thing behind that is also as well, he kind of said, I think she's a problem behind it. and I was like, oh, he's not backing her emotionally. And maybe because the reason why maybe he's not backing her is because of what he's experienced. And because of the way he is right now. He can't back her because he feels pain in the way that he's been dealt with in the last few hours, right? But then that leads to a really big argument later on, which is about him coming to explain again about the fact that he felt aggrieved by the comment about the insecurity. It felt like he'd been shot in the back, because I brought the situation to you saying about the yoga. I didn't interrupt you. I didn't force you out of it. I just said after I felt some type of way about it. And then now you're calling me insecure for actually bringing it up. And so when he starts talking about this and having a conversation with her, she then flips it and goes, I now don't feel safe with your anger. You're simmering, you're boiling, you're burning. Now, listen, when you start saying all those words, I actually think he's right to lead the conversation. Because the moment you try to engage in this conversation, you won't win. Also, the narrative has been flipped. In this situation, by the way, I don't think he was shouting. He wasn't screaming. He just told her politely, listen, look, you're interrupting me. Let's not do that. And that was this was his tone. You're interrupting me. Let's not do that. That's why he had to leave. And that is what happens when people are emotionally immature. They start gaslighting you and flipping it. Now, she might have actually felt emotionally unsafe because actually, in reality of the situation, what she's experiencing doesn't have two truths can be true. She can actually be experiencing it, but it might not necessarily be him per se. She might be feeling emotionally unsafe because she feels like she's not being heard, or she feels like she feels unsafe because she actually doesn't fancy this guy. Right? You do start feeling unsafe when you don't like someone like that. You get what I'm saying to you? So in this situation, I felt like the way she twisted the narrative in the end to say not unsafe, right? And I get it. She was saying about his demeanor and the fact that he was in, but actually he was sitting down on the bed. He had his side on. He had a side profile to her. He wasn't facing her head on. Like he was talking at a low volume. He never threatened. He never insulted. He never said anything rude. None of those things. And immediately she went to the I feel unsafe with your demeanor. Yeah, he's got to leave. He's got to leave. At that point, he's left with no choice because at that point, you can also get in trouble. If she now starts saying, I felt unsafe, the narrative is done. Like as a man, you can't fight that narrative. So you see how it's flipped? See how it's dangerous? That's a very dangerous place to go to, right? But I also understand that she may have actually felt emotionally unsafe. That doesn't mean that he's actually done anything to make her feel unsafe. It just means that for her, that's how she feels. You can't fight feelings. So let me know your thoughts down below. I mean, this is quite an interesting situation. I saw it and I was like, oh, I wish I could have provided clips for you guys. Would have been much more better, but unfortunately, my system is playing up. But listen, make sure you guys like, share, subscribe, click on that bell button for notification of uploads. Let me know your thoughts down below. I appreciate you guys. Stay locked. So we'll see you again soon.